Gary, have you got him turned on?
He can turn it on himself, I think.
Oh, you, there. Now you got it.
Oh, okay.
Pull the chair around wherever. Once you guys. No, she's over there.
Yeah, that's what he thinks.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, I can sit there, just, I can take this stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, I can turn it underneath.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Now I see Benny.
We're on? Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for coming here this afternoon, and look forward to an interesting presentation on maple syrup production. My name is Luke Hunt, originally from Wisconsin, and there's a lot of maple syrup being produced up there. I was raised in the northern part of the state, in the woods, and in the winter, on a dairy farm, there was not a whole lot of work to do. So Dad would go out into the woods, tap the trees, and then tend the fire. How many have tapped a tree before or have made maple syrup? Okay, good. Yeah, so we have here a maple tree. The trees are amazing structures, amazing organisms. They're a remarkable creation that God has made. And there are so many products that come from the trees, from rubber to wood to musical instruments to maple syrup. And the functioning of a tree, just having a tree in the backyard, they say does something to your mental health. So if you have trouble with your mind, look outside. Everything is wearing green about this time of the year. And it's so beautiful out there. And if you walk through that woods, you would probably sense an increase in oxygen, because every one of those green leaves is producing or releasing oxygen. And as you go out there, they're going to be taking in the carbon dioxide. So we'll take a look at the structure of the stem here. I'm going to give a little bit of anatomy, then I'll get into the production of the maple syrup. But we have here a section of a tree, a maple tree, and you notice that in the center there is a darker area. That is the hardwood. The lighter wood on the outside is the sapwood. This wood is there for strength and support. This is really non-functional as far as conducting tissue or conducting syrup or sap. The outside of the bark here is where the phloem is. The phloem conducts the sap from the leaf throughout the tree, and including the roots. The hardwood, like we said, is just there to support the tree and to give strength. So under here, underneath the dead part, is the phloem and the xylem. They are both conducting tissues, but between the two, there is a layer of vascular cambium. And that cambium produces new xylem and new phloem. And as the tree grows, rings are added to the xylem and a little bit to the phloem. So when we take the xylem that's produced in the spring, and the cells are larger then, and then the cells that are produced in the summer, that gives us a growth ring. And on this tree, how old do you think that would be? Give me a wild guess.
150 years
Oh, not quite. Pardon? Yeah, I counted, I think, around 40. And some of those rings are so tiny you can hardly see them, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or less. and others are almost 1/4 of an inch. That tells us that the tree had some very good growing seasons, and at other times the growing season was short or not very favorable. So we have xylem. This is all xylem, and that's what we generally call or refer to as wood. The wood on the log is the xylem. And we talked about the sapwood. Now the structure of the leaf, just a little bit, because here is where the sap originates. We have that very complex process called photosynthesis, where we have oxygen and water and light, and that will give us carbohydrate, which is in the sap. It'll give us carbon dioxide, and it'll give us water. So into the leaf goes the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, and in the presence of light and chlorophyll, we will have the sap produced. So the leaf is divided up into a blade and the petiole. This is where it's connected to the stem. And the stem, or the petiole, sort of allows the leaf to flop around to get more carbon dioxide and to release the oxygen. So this is the structure of the leaf. And the sap that is produced in the leaf will travel down the stem through the phloem, and it'll be distributed throughout the plant, including down in the roots. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask.
So it's stored there all winter long, right?
Pardon?
The sap from the leaf is stored there in the wood all
Yes,
winter long.
yeah. And then when we get to the spring, then when we have the thawing days and the freezing nights, that changes the temperature, changes the pressure in the log. And as the pressure changes, it's going to put pressure on the sap, and then when we drill a hole, like I'll do here, the pressure is going to be released. Now, there's nothing coming out of the tree here today.
Wrong time of the year.
Yeah, right. So why did I drill the hole here? Well, usually when we tap a tree, the hole is around 3 to 4 feet off the ground. And the angle is a little bit like this, not perpendicular or horizontal, but angled up a little bit. Who does the sweeping here? Then we'll take a spile or a spout and tap that in, tapping a tree.
That's a little tube.
Yes. When my dad used to do this, we took a stem from sumac. I don't know if you know what sumac is, but it has a very thick pith. So we burned that pith out with a burner, and then he sharpened the end and just used that for the spile. So this will hang on here. And we'll put a lid on there. The lid goes on so it protects it from snow and insects and debris that may fall into it. So, and generally we tap a tree with, if we can, with a large branch above or a large root below. And then that is an ideal place for putting a tap. How many taps do we put in? This one could use 2. Sometimes if the tree is larger in circumference, you'll see 3 buckets on the tree. And if we go through the whole season, this tree could probably produce 30 gallons of sap. And 30 gallons of sap is enough for 1 gallon of syrup. The ratio is 30 to 1. But if you like a different flavor, this tree is walnut, black walnut. They say, and I haven't done that, and I actually, it was a couple of years ago, was driving down the road and I saw these buckets on a tree, and they were on black walnut trees. And I thought, well, that person doesn't know the difference between a black walnut and a maple. And then I learned, yes, every tree will produce sap. You can get sap from any tree because that's how they distribute their energy. And then I heard that those are walnut trees. They're supposed to be walnut trees and they're supposed to be tapped. But it takes 80 gallons of walnut sap to make a gallon of walnut syrup. But that is supposed to be very flavorable. But when you boil that much sap down, I think there might be some residues or some chemicals or some minerals in there that just may not be too good for you. So what is better, honey or maple syrup? It depends on your flavor, on your taste. Well, the maple syrup doesn't have as many calories as honey. So if you're watching calories and you like something sweet, you might use the maple syrup. So when we take the sap out of the tree, there's about 2% of that sap that is sugar. And that's why it takes about 30 to 40 gallons to make a single gallon of sap, of syrup. Now after the tree is tapped, you collect the sap, then you take it to the evaporator. And back in the woods in Wisconsin, the evaporation was done in the woods. Dad dug a trench in a little hill, put cement blocks on each side, put a pan across the top, and used wood for our heat, for our energy. And that's one reason why maple syrup is so expensive. It takes a lot of energy to evaporate the water. And some people use propane, some people use fuel oil, or else wood. But in any case, it's expensive. And that's why a quart, I don't know, this is probably $25. So it's expensive. There are several places around here that do custom evaporating. There's a place in Laketon that will evaporate your sap and you'll get half of it back and he gets the other half. So there are several places that do that. And if you were to buy an evaporator, all you really need is a turkey fryer. That will work, which is not expensive. But if you want to buy an evaporator that works fast and will get the job done quickly, then you can spend $6,000, $7,000. But an evaporator like that, as the sap slowly comes in on one end, the syrup comes out on the other end in a continuous flow. So there's that continuous flow with the modern evaporators. Yeah, so that's what you do. You take the sap to the evaporator and you boil it until the temperature is around 219. And that means it's finished. Don't go much higher because there's a very narrow gap there between the syrup and all of a sudden it turns to sugar or to candy. So I used to make maple syrup at Whitco High School. We have a cabin over there and we built this so that we could put an evaporator into the chimney in the fireplace. And this was fascinating to the students. They couldn't imagine. Most of them are just, it's a foreign idea, a foreign skill or art. And one day I went out there and I saw M&Ms floating around in the tank. And I could have gotten upset about that, and I thought, well, this kid he's trying something new. But we had to throw that out, and then we started over. But it was a very interesting activity for the students to get out into the woods to begin with, and that is something else. I think that those who enjoy the woods will enjoy making the maple syrup. We've just sort of lost contact with the forest and all the things that go on out there and all the benefits that the forest gives to us. Okay, I was going to talk a little bit more about the pressure. When we put a spile in here or a drill in there, it's almost like putting scratching your skin. You scratch the skin and the pressure from the blood will cause it to bleed or leak. So what we did here is put a leak into the trunk of the tree, because that pressure during the day when it's thawing is going to increase and it'll force that sap out. And then at night, when it freezes, the pressure is gone down again and the sap stops. Okay, do you have any questions that I can answer?
Yeah.
Yes?
Why doesn't that hurt the tree?
Oh. If we took 30 gallons of sap from this tree, there'd be plenty left to produce leaves during the summer. And actually out here in Timbercrest Woods, there are some maple trees that have holes in them. And actually there's a couple they must have used some type of a plastic tube, and the tube is broken off and you can still see the tube in the tree. It may have just a little bit of effect on the quality of the timber, because if we tap here, then from this point up, there is sort of a dark line that may not make the timber that valuable or reduce the value of the timber. But it doesn't hurt the tree unless you put in 4 or 5 buckets around. You know. But we have some maple trees out here that could handle at least 3 buckets. Yes?
Does that make it any weaker for maybe insects or something else to get in and be another problem for the tree?
Well, as long as the spile's in, the insects are not going to get in. But when the sap stops running, then the insects are not attracted in there as much. So no, there's not that much of a problem with the insects getting in there. I do have a slide that someday I might have the chance to show. When they were cutting some of the wood here for the trail, there was a maple tree about that big that they cut off. And when I went out there, there were flies all over that little stump. And I got a shot of that. So there was a lot of sugar coming out attracting those insects. But the insect problem with a log like this is not going to be a problem.
You mentioned about picking a place to do it, like the leaves above it or a branch above it or roots beneath it. Does the side where there's more sun, would that have any effect to it?
Yes. Where would you put the spile if the tree was right here? The southeast side, because that's where the sun rises, that's where it's going to get warm, and this tree will sort of thaw as the sun goes around it. So yes, they're always on the south side or a little bit to the southeast. Or if you, like we said, if there's a huge root below or a nice heavy branch above, there's sort of an increased flow of sap between those. Someone else have a question? Yes.
Yeah, I'm surprised they would tap a walnut tree. I hope it's not a high quality walnut tree like you get near.
Yes, that's, well, yeah, why would someone tap a walnut tree when it's so valuable as timber? And there are walnut trees out here that are worth $1,000 or more, maybe several thousand, because they are huge walnut trees, and the first branches are way up there. I don't know what Timbercrest has in mind. Like a lot of the big trees, they fall, which is not bad. That'll return the nutrients to the soil. As the log rots, what was in the ground to begin with goes back to the ground. And the maple is the most common tree in Indiana. More maple than any other tree. And I think probably the second most valuable tree after walnut would be probably white oak.
So that's a 5-gallon pail, you have one there? And you need
No,
6.
it's not 5, probably 3 gallons, yeah.
So you need to fill that up quite often in order to get your gallon of syrup. So you keep an eye on it so it doesn't overflow?
Well, it's going to be wasted if it overflows, so you try to schedule the picking up of the sap so that doesn't
And
happen.
some days it fills a lot faster than other days.
Exactly, yeah.
You
Yeah.
get about half a bucket like that in a day, wouldn't you?
Depends when,
Yeah, it depends on the temperature, depends on, probably mainly the temperature, but some seasons are better than others. You may have a season where there'll be more sap produced. Yeah, there's just so many factors that enter in as to what you're going to get from the tree.
It would seem like if it's a real dry season, that
Yeah.
would be a factor
Yeah.
that would hinder it from being much.
Now, last year was a pretty good season, or this past season was a pretty good season from what I've heard. And you look, pardon, Norma?
Too early to start with it now.
Now, it's too late.
best time is
It's
what?
too late or too early. Usually,
February and March.
yes. Yeah, the end of February through April, or the middle of April, is when the sap flows. Yes.
There are a lot of different kinds of maple. Does it matter what kind of maple you use?
It'll still be maple syrup, but the red maple, the silver maple will not produce as much syrup or much sap, and it's not as sweet. So the sugar maple is the one that is the ideal tree for tapping.
We tried
But-
the silver maple.
Oh, yeah?
It was very sweet, made an awful mess in the kitchen.
Oh,
Yeah.
When we traveled to New England, there was an awful lot of maple syrup roundabout. Is that a particular spot that's,
is that a particular what?
when we traveled in New England?
Yeah.
We had a lot of people trying to sell maple things, and I wondered
Oh,
if that
yeah,
was
yes, Vermont is pretty well known for its maple production.
because of the weather or what?
Probably not so much the weather, it's just that the soil is ideal for growing the maple, and probably the sugar content for some reason. Maybe it's a different genetic line that produces more sugar. But I know there's a lot of, anything related to maple will sell well in Vermont or Canada.
I was told by a former resident of Timbercrest that Vermont maple syrup is better than Indiana maple syrup. And she swore that it was, but I never got to give her a test.
Oh,
I wanted to blindfold her and give her a test. I don't know, maybe you know something about that.
no, I wouldn't know whether Indiana maple syrup is any better or any worse, or better flavor or not.
I think it was because she had a friend up there.
Yeah, probably. Making maple syrup, huh?
Do you know
Yes.
how people figured out how to do this?
Oh.
Who were the first people to do this?
The first people, we really can't answer that. But somehow, and it probably was by accident, have you seen icicles on, or sapsicles on a tree, on a maple tree? If you would taste them, you would notice the sugar. And then from that, how would you concentrate that sugar? Well, just freezing the sap will increase the percentage of sugar. The ice is just H2O. So you throw the ice away, and that leaves a more concentrated sap.
When you're boiling down the sap, you have to be stirring that all the time?
No, no,
Just keep feeding the fire?
feed the fire. And you want to try and use a wood that doesn't produce a lot of ash, because you're going to burn a lot of wood. But the wood that has the most heat in it that will be best would be oak. Elm is good. Ash is good, but that leaves some ash. What else can we say about it? You mentioned cooking on a stove. That happened also in the cabin. Someone was not keeping their eye on it, and I was in the classroom and I saw smoke coming out the windows of the chimney, windows of the cabin, and I ran out there, and the thing was smoking. It wasn't burning, fortunately. But if you don't watch it, you're going to lose the whole batch, plus maybe burn down, burn up the kitchen.
When you boil it down on your kitchen stove, it makes your cupboards all sticky.
Right.
Yes,
That's evaporation, still has some stickiness.
yeah. I got that warning from Darlene, my wife. Finish it at school, and finishing it means take it off the evaporator at school when the temperature is still kind of low. And then I'll take it home and then evaporate it until that temperature is right, and then we'll can it.
You don't have to process it after you put it in the jars. You can
No.
just make a hot jar and a hot lid and seal it.
The thing is, maple syrup will spoil,
It does.
unlike honey. Honey will never spoil. So if you open up a jar of maple syrup, you need to refrigerate it to keep the bacteria from growing, or the fungi.
Well, we have about 3 minutes. Do you want to serve now, or you want
Oh.
to do it after?
Yeah, help me here.
Yeah.
No, I don't know, is anyone allergic to maple syrup? Not today anyway, huh? Okay.
So
Now-
you're gonna,
This is not my maple syrup. It was purchased commercially, so,
you want this poured in here,
Yeah.
just passed around?
If you pour, it will pass.
Okay,
Does that work?
open it up. Not that I couldn't, but it is pretty thick
yeah, it's
there. There we go.
sugary. Maybe just a little bit of, yeah, that should be good.
I do have a trash can handy. There's one near the door.
We needed ice cream.
Is there a waste can?
Yeah, there's
Lisa.
one in the back.
We should have had ice cream, and then we could have
Oh.
drizzled it on top of it.
Oh, yeah, or pancakes, huh? Or waffles.
Well, yeah, but wrong time of day.
If you haven't ever tasted the sap as it comes out from the bucket, it has a little sweet taste to it, but not much. Yeah, there we have about twice as many people as I had cups set out, so I'm making spots all over this.
Take your time, we're fine.
Well, this is a very expensive demonstration.
Well, we don't really use it that much. I have bees. My next presentation could be on bees. We like honey.
Where do you have your bees?
Does it taste like maple?
I have them over at Jerry Bollinger's, just a couple of miles down the road here.
Yeah, she has a lot on this side.
Okay, okay. Oh, can
How
I
are we
do it?
doing? There's people in the back. Are we getting that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.